Molecular hydrogen is becoming a buzzword, and there are a lot of people touting its benefits, talking about how amazing it is for various health ailments, but they are not necessarily referencing the correct research with their products, and their information may not be correct. What this is leading to is a lot of larger voices like Joe Rogan and Dr. Andrew Huberman getting it wrong when it comes to molecular hydrogen. Now, I have someone on the show today, Dr. Tyler LeBaron, who is the head of the Molecular Hydrogen Institute, who's going to give us an unbiased opinion of the science. Now, he does do consulting for various companies that do hydrogen products, but he is not affiliated with or selling any hydrogen products. He is purely in for the research and in for the therapeutic use of hydrogen and understanding that. Now, he actually has had conversations with Dr. Huberman since they originally aired the episode where Huberman got a few things wrong about hydrogen. And I'm gunning for Dr. LeBaron to be on Huberman. So if anyone out there is listening and has a connection, let's get him on that podcast to get this information out there. But for now, you're going to be stuck with me in my podcast. So today, Dr. Tyler and I are going to talk all about hydrogen therapeutic uses, the difference between inhalation and drinking, and just how to know if what you're getting is what's actually being advertised. So, thank you so much for listening and watching the show. I do have one hydrogen product that I personally use, and Dr. LeBaron says it is good quality, and that's the Holy Hydrogen. You can use the code SarahK to check out that product. I'll link it in the show notes. But again, he does not represent any products. He just does consulting for various companies. So he knows what's available and useful in the market and what is not. So hopefully you find this information useful. If you do, make sure to head on over to Spotify or Apple, leave the show up to a 5-star review. Or if you are watching over on YouTube, leave us a like, leave us a comment, and let me know if you want a part 2. If there are more questions that you have about hydrogen, leave us a comment over on YouTube, and I'll make sure to possibly have a part 2 with Dr. LeBaron. Thank you again so much for watching, and let's go ahead and get into today's episode. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know I don't really talk about a lot of skincare products because I believe that good skin comes from nourishing and hydrating the inside of your body. But I did just turn 45, and I'm always looking for clean, innovative ways to nourish and hydrate my skin from the outside as well. That's why I have really been enjoying Purity Woods age-defying dream cream, and it really does enhance the look of your skin and defy aging. Let's talk about why I endorse this brand above others. Purity Woods' mission is to provide people with the cleanest and most effective healthy aging and longevity products available. All their products are USDA certified organic, non-GMO, free of anything artificial, free of toxic preservatives and synthetic additives like pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and dyes, parabens, and it is cruelty free and never been tested on animals before. Purity Woods is currently offering 17% off site wide, but we have an additional 10% discount for our listeners for a total savings of 27%. If you go to puritywoods.com/Sarah or enter the code Sarah at checkout, you'll get an additional 10% off your first order. That's Purity Woods, PURITYWOODS.com, and enter the code Sarah for 27% off your first order. I've really been enjoying their skincare, and I think you will too, so check it out. Today's show is brought to you by Upgraded Formulas. They have my absolute favorite magnesium. You can get the best and only clinically studied stabilized nano magnesium supplement on the market from Upgraded Formulas using my code YOGI for 10% off. Did you know that magnesium is actually required for over 800 enzymatic reactions in the body? This clinically studied magnesium has proven to improve sleep quality and energy by over 60%, specifically improving light sleep measurement by 90%, REM sleep by 150%, and deep sleep by 250%. That means more energy, better mood, and deeper sleep. Who doesn't want that? What makes this the best on the market? This specific magnesium is nanomagnesium, which means it is easier for your body to absorb and use. In fact, it is absorbed up to 99.99%, which means you'll feel the results instantaneously. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am really excited today to have today's guest. We are going to talk about all things hydrogen. So, Dr. Tyler, thank you so much for being here today.
My absolute pleasure. I'm happy to spread some education awareness and something I'm super passionate about. So, yeah, thanks for having me, inviting me to your platform.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've had people for the last probably 4 years saying that I needed to interview you. So, this has definitely been a long time coming. And I'd love it if you could just tell everyone a little bit about your background and what it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, I am a hydrogen researcher. I did my PhD researching hydrogen. Hydrogen gas. It was in physiology, adjunct instructor of chemistry and exercise physiology also. But yeah, I started back in 2009. I mean, we could even go, even further before that. Just always being interested in health and wellness, exercise, and everything. And so, but in 2009, I came across alkaline ionized water and trying to understand if it really had any benefits and if so, why. And as through my studies and things, I learned it was hydrogen gas, and which maybe we'll talk about here later. But that's when I started researching hydrogen gas, clear back then, and then ended up going to Japan in 2013 and researched hydrogen in cell signaling pathways at Nagoya University. And then I returned, started Molecular Hydrogen Institute, and then later I just continued researching and collaborating with everybody all around.
Awesome. Yeah. So I mean, when it comes to hydrogen, I feel like you have done the most research and the most due diligence around how it can be used therapeutically and quality, all of that stuff, because I feel like there's a lot of it's a fairly new thing. Wasn't hydrogen inhalation, and wasn't it discovered in sometimes in the 2000s, was it, or was it before then?
Yeah, no, in 2007 is,
Yeah.
well, okay, before then, but 2007 is really what we would say it marks the growth of molecular hydrogen research, because there was an article that published in Nature Medicine, and it showed that molecular hydrogen was able to have therapeutic antioxidant effects as a selective antioxidant, and it was done via inhalation.
Mm-hmm.
And when they used just 2% hydrogen gas, it was able to markedly suppress the brain damage of a cerebral infarction or a stroke model. Whereas helium gas had no effect, but hydrogen gas was very effective, and the results are very prominent. But then this was published in Nature Medicine, which is one of the top scientific articles or journals that there is. So it really got a lot of mainstream medical attention, and then that a lot of other researchers doing research on it, and the research continued. So yeah, I would say 2007 is really when it really started.
Awesome. And so that's kind of about you a little bit after that is when you got into this and started saying, wow, this could have some therapeutic benefit. And you mentioned doctors getting involved in this. I know they do, from what I've heard, use hydrogen therapeutically in places like Japan, but it's not necessarily being done so much here in the US. Am I correct in that, or am I missing something?
Yeah, absolutely. It is used in Japan and Asia and other places quite a lot, but maybe not as extensively as we think, or people are tend to believe. I've heard people say, it's in ambulances, it's in all these
Wow.
hospitals and everything, and that's not truly accurate. Now, hydrogen gas was approved by the Japanese government as a Class 2B medical device, basically as a for the treatment of post cardiac arrest syndrome as part of an emergency medicine. But that's so
Wow.
that it could be basically used in hospitals for major clinical studies to really determine its effects. Because you have to get levels of approvals, sort of like with the FDA. You have to get approvals with NDI or IND, an investigative new drug, which hydrogen gas also has had that approval by the FDA for specific indications, again, not for treatments, but for, able to do the studies. And so then with that in Japan, like you do have a lot of alternative clinics or something, and in Asia where people can come in and do inhalation therapies or intravenous hydrogen-rich saline therapies or different things, and that happens. And yeah, it's growing here in the USA. Maybe it's not as much that you find in Asia, but it is still there. But that's growing here in America. So you have a lot of doctors' offices, chiropractors and naturopathic doctors and so on that will use hydrogen inhalation or just giving them hydrogen water or do other types of modalities to administer the molecular hydrogen.
Interesting. And there's definitely a difference between drinking the water and inhalation as far as therapeutic benefits go. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the differences there.
Yeah, I know everyone wants to know which one's better, is it
Right.
inhalation or is it the drinking? And it's a difficult question because it probably really depends on the individual and the specific condition, because the fact is the pharmacokinetics of hydrogen gas is different for each method of administration, and
Mhm.
therefore the pharmacodynamics are different. So what that means is, like with inhalation, you are directly inhaling the hydrogen gas. It's going into the lungs, entering the bloodstream, and then going systematically throughout the rest of the body, right?
Mhm.
Whereas with the drinking of hydrogen water, you're going to drink it. It's going to go into the stomach and then the intestines. It's going to have influence in the microbiome, activating various second messenger systems in the GI tract, in the liver. It can have effects there as well. And so some of those areas inhalation does not necessarily get. And so when you look at some of the animal studies, for example, where you compare the two, there's certain gene expressions that are changed by one method and not the other. And sometimes there's an additive benefit as well. And so we really can't say, oh, this one's more effective than the other is. There are times where maybe only inhalation is the only way to go. Like if somebody's in a coma or something like that, you can really only do inhalation.
Mm.
And so in general, one way to think about it, it may not be accurate, but there's a tendency and some uh, rationale to believe that for inhalation is often used for more of an emergency type considerations, acute medicine, acute treatment type things, whereas the drinking of hydrogen water is more of for long-term chronic consumption, for the prevention or optimizing your own health and wellness and everything. So
Mm.
they both kind of work hand in hand.
That makes sense. And I guess if people are, I've been talking a lot about hydrogen on this podcast on a lot of different episodes, but maybe just to do a quick little review of, you mentioned hydrogen being a selective antioxidant, just why it works so well, why it works the way that it does, and can kind of give a systemic benefit to the body.
Yeah, and the key word that you mentioned is the selectivity, this
Mhm.
as a selective antioxidant. And that's because our body, we produce free radicals all the time. And of course, free radicals are these molecules that contain an unpaired electron. And so they want to steal an electron basically from anything else, which causes this oxidative damage and oxidative stress. This is like, metals rusting and apples turning brown, all of these types of things. When that gets out of control, that's going to be really bad, right? It leads to cell death, leads to
Mhm.
cellular mutations and all these conditions. And so we have to combat that, and we do so with antioxidants. But at the same time, these free radicals are important signaling molecules because they do oxidize a protein. But when that protein is oxidized, that induces a signaling in the cell, which causes the cell to maybe get stronger, to become more resilient, to activate its DNA repair mechanisms, to do all these things. It's just when it's too much, you
Yes.
oxidize too many of the proteins, then the problems start happening. So you actually want and need to have free radicals, just not too much of them or the wrong ones. And
Right.
that's where hydrogen really shines, is its selectivity, because unlike conventional antioxidants, hydrogen gas actually cannot even react with the biological or normal physiologically normal free radicals that we want, that we need, like nitric oxide, superoxide, or other oxygen species like hydrogen peroxide. If you put hydrogen gas with these other molecules, there would be no reaction actually, because hydrogen gas does not contain the reducing power to neutralize these free radicals, because it's hydrogen is a stable molecule. It has two hydrogen atoms that are covalently bonded together to make it a neutral, stable molecule. So it's a strong covalent bond. So it's not easily broken. And so it could actually only react with extremely high toxic oxidative radicals, such as the hydroxyl radical, which pretty much has no known benefits, but is extremely destructive. And so hydrogen gas could react with that radical, for example. But then even more, hydrogen regulates our cell's own redox homeostasis by regulating things like the NRF2 or NRF2 pathway, which regulates our body's own natural antioxidants and detoxification enzymes. And by regulating all of these, then it's able to maintain that redox homeostasis to make sure that we're not suffering from either oxidative stress or reductive stress. And again, that it's selectivity. And then with that also, just the properties of hydrogen, because it is so small, like we said, the smallest molecule
Hmm.
in the universe, it can easily penetrate not just the cell membrane, but actually enter into the mitochondria or the nucleus or the blood-brain barrier or other places that perhaps conventional antioxidants either cannot get access to or cannot get access very quickly or easily, just because they're large or they're charged, or they have to go through a like a protein transport or some
Yep.
carrier molecule, whereas molecular hydrogen doesn't require any of that. It can just diffuse through the cell membrane via simple passive diffusion.
Hmm. That's why it might be a better form of antioxidant therapy than getting these vitamin C infusions or NAD infusions, which I don't think they are never warranted or necessary. I think sometimes those can be helpful, but I've actually seen them cause more harm than good. Um, in my opinion, when you
Yeah.
look at hydrogen and what it does in the cell and in the mitochondria, it makes sense as to why some of these other antioxidant therapies can go haywire.
Yeah, and it's not just a mechanism that we're talking about where maybe those types of antioxidants at the high levels of vitamin C or vitamin E or something or A can be problematic. But there's actually animal and clinical studies demonstrating that too, that taking high doses of these antioxidants impair mitochondrial biogenesis, impair insulin sensitivity, and increase overall mortality and everything. Now, this is not just talking about getting your DRI, your daily required intake, or a little bit more than that. But we're
Mega
talking about people who
dosing.
are doing like high doses all the time of the intravenous injection, or just taking lots of pill forms of these
Mhm.
antioxidants. That's what's problematic. And we see that it not only doesn't help, but it actually hurts. Whereas
Mhm.
with molecular hydrogen, um, in the worst case scenario, it doesn't help, but there's no downside. It's not going to um, dis disturb your redox homeostasis or cause a reductive stress or promote oxidative stress or other things that things like vitamin C and others can and have been shown to do that.
Mhm.
So hydrogen that's something that separates hydrogen from a lot of other things. Is just that it has a very high safety profile, and it's all about maintaining the homeostasis of the cell.
Yeah. And I'm curious if there's a mechanism by which hydrogen is creating more water made at step four, or even just more exclusions on water, period, surrounding the cell and inside the mitochondria. Is that a
Yeah.
thing? Yeah.
Maybe it's a good question. I've thought about that myself. I mean, when hydrogen gas, if it does end up reacting with hydroxyl radicals, so take a molecule of hydrogen gas could react with two hydroxyl radicals, OH radicals, not OH minus, which are hydroxide ions, but hydroxyl radicals, and it can convert both of those radicals to water, so you get two molecules of water. But when you do the calculation, so for example, if you're ingesting a milligram of hydrogen, so and you calculate how many moles of that would be, and then you convert that to liters of water. I mean, you're talking about a microliter level of water. So it doesn't, in my mind, it wouldn't be significant. And then this idea of the exclusion zone water, that's a whole nother topic. But let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, um, about its benefits, because it is true that water, when it's at the surface of your proteins and your cell membranes and everything, that it is more of in a structured form.
Yeah.
And in cases of disease and dysregulation, you kind of lose some of that structuring of what's going on. Well, hydrogen, because it is so small and can diffuse through the cell membranes and into proteins in different areas very easily, when it does do that, um, it will structure the water.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to explain a little bit because sometimes people see that a little more like metaphysical, and it's really quite simple. You
Mm-hmm.
have free water, which is just bulk free water, that the hydrogen bonds are changing at at basically a billionth of a second, and so all this is just free water. This is free floating and everything. But when you dissolve something, a solute in the water, or if you have like around your proteins and things, then the water forms associations around those other proteins or those solutes, whatever it is, and that associations makes those water molecules not as free, but that's why it forms this gel-like structure.
Hmm.
And so what hydrogen gas is also a solute, and so when it dissolves into the water, it's going to be solvated by several water molecules around the hydrogen molecule, and therefore takes those water molecules that were otherwise totally free, and it's going to by that solvation sphere or hydration sphere, it's going to make them in a more of a structure type way. And then so maybe that formation of a cellular or of a water structure at that protein level could influence the way the protein, the conformation of the protein and
Mm-hmm.
its structure dictates its function and so on. So we start to see maybe some of the benefits of hydrogen could be mediated by its effect on structuring interfacial water.
So essentially giving it more of a negative charge, right? Or increasing the voltage.
Um, it's that's a little bit. It, I guess I wouldn't say it that way,
Yeah.
because when you say because like hydrogen gas is a neutral molecule, and
Right.
so it has two electrons and two protons, so it's not going to necessarily
Be an
alter
electron. Yeah.
a voltage potential. So like if you have like sodium ions, that's a positive one charge, and and so and chloride is -1. So if you have like chloride, in the inside of the cell and sodium on the outside of the cell, as an example, then yeah, you would have a charge separation, right? Hydrogen gas doesn't necessarily do that. Again, I guess the idea with this exclusion zone water is you start forming this separation more and more. And so in that case, if you're structuring part of this interfacial water and allowing the water to provide a better structure, then you could monitor this different charge. But that charge is still different than the charge on that is used with the sodium potassium ATPase that makes the membrane potential in the first place. Now, I realize that people like Gerald Pollack and others, actually don't really believe in all of this stuff. But I actually just talked with him, and the reason he didn't believe in that stuff was because, he wasn't he didn't see that the evidence was convincing of those types of things. But he wasn't aware that we now have literally the protein structures, using spectroscopy in different ways, so we know the exact, motifs of and protein folding and amino acid sequence that are making these ion channels and things. So it was an interesting discussion, and that maybe we should continue having.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people are quick to talk about the benefits of sunlight, but what gets often missed in the conversation is the benefit of darkness and the importance of protecting yourself from blue and green light after sunset. That is why I choose Viva Rays as my go to source for protecting my circadian rhythms. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% off at Viva Rays. Now, you may have seen some of these studies popping up. I call them fear mongering about blue blockers not being effective. And that is a partial truth because when you use blue blockers that are clear or that have not been tested with a spectrometer to actually block what they say they do, they will not protect your circadian rhythms and they are not catching those key wavelengths that you need to be blocking in order for your body to be able to repair, for you to make melatonin, which is a master antioxidant. And artificial light at night has been in the scientific literature extensively linked to a host of hormonal cancers, obesity, diabetes, and all sorts of metabolic issues. That again is why I choose Viva Rays as my go-to source for protecting my circadian rhythms to allow my body to get adequate darkness at night. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays, and you can actually trust that they block the frequencies of light that they say they do. Thanks to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's podcast. I guess for the listener that might have just like eyes glazed over,
Yeah.
hydrogen, I think, has a potential to support healthy mitochondria function. Would you say?
Yeah, because the mitochondria, of course, is the powerhouse of the cell,
Right.
producing lots of the ATP. Well, when the mitochondria is suffering from oxidative stress, from calcium dysregulation, and
Mm.
all sorts of things that happen from environmental toxins, from the foods,
Non-native
from
EMF.
yeah, exactly. All of these types of things. Well, hydrogen as a protectant can help protect the mitochondria from this type of damage, but it can
Mm.
also activate the mitochondria. Hydrogen has actually been suggested to actually act as a rectifier of the electron transport chain.
Ah.
And what that means is it can actually help potentiate um, the making of the proton gradient and allow the electrons to flow in the correct way, so to have as much of a reverse electron transport, which is going to create free radicals. But also sometimes it might help actually produce a little bit of free radicals, and that in turn activates a cascade of cellular mechanisms to induce mitochondrial rejuvenation in regeneration, because you have induction of what's called a mitochondrial unfolded protein response, and hydrogen gas can do this actually. So
Mm.
there's tons of benefits on hydrogen on the mitochondria.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of diseases, disorders, they have a root in the mitochondria and heteroplasmy, right? If you look at like Dr. Doug Wallace's work, I think that that is a lot more compelling than kind of trying to get into minutia of like different genes and different, the way people are kind of looking at the lens of health. I feel like looking at it from the view of the mitochondria and supporting the body from that lens is a lot more empowering, um, and almost a little bit easier in my opinion.
Yeah, mitochondria are absolute. They're so important, and we want to have high functioning and high density mitochondria in our cells so that we can ensure optimal cellular health, right? And that internal support optimal gene expression influences on at an epigenetic level on our genes and so on. So there's a lot of back and forth crosstalk that's going on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of live and die by these genetic tests. And the thing is, like, if your mitochondria are healthy and supported, a lot of these genes don't necessarily even get expressed. And so that's why I prefer to send people to the model of like, let's support your body from this mechanism rather than trying to give you a supplement because you have this genetic SNP or do this specific, not saying all that information should be discarded, but it's just a
Mhm.
lot more, I think, empowering and simple for people to work from this lens.
Yeah. Well, for me, that's the benefit of the model of hydrogen
Hydrogen.
gas in general.
Yeah.
Anyway, just because hydrogen does support the mitochondria as well as gene expression, right? We
Mhm.
actually have published some studies showing that hydrogen influences microRNAs and other protein phosphorylation cascades that in turn influences gene expression. And
Mm.
so we're trying hydrogen can attack the situation from a whole bunch of different areas. And in general, then hopefully that can explain these pleiotropic effects of hydrogen for so many different diseases and conditions.
And how many studies are there, like right now, as we're having this conversation about hydrogen, either the water or
Yeah.
inhalation? It's in the thousands, right?
Yeah, there's well over 1,000 studies. I mean, if you look at all the publications, so including like review articles and hypotheses papers and things, you're probably over 3,000 publications
Mm.
in total. Most of the actual studies, of course, are animal studies, as would be expected, but you actually have, over 150 human studies
Mm.
that have been published also. So this it's no small amount on the one hand, but on the other hand, to really determine its true clinical efficacy and significance and meaning and figuring out the optimal dose and frequency and method of administration and so on, we still really need a lot more studies and really we need like that many studies in one specific disease. Whereas right now, these studies
So
are
many.
on, so many different diseases because you have so many different universities and labs all around the world working on it. Not
Mm.
just a single lab with millions and millions of dollars all focused on one specific disease, which would be required in order to figure out what the best dose and frequency and method administration and mechanisms of action and primary targets and so on that would be required.
Yeah, it's kind of like red light therapy. All of the photobiomodulation research is exploding. I was listening to Dr. Belkowski's podcast this morning, and he's saying, I thought there were like 6,000 studies on photobiomodulation. It's actually more like 10,000 now. So I feel like hydrogen is kind of gaining steam to be in that category is something that they want to study more and more of, especially because there's a lot of companies now that are developing these different products. And so that's kind of what happened with the red light therapy industry is like, oh, we can make these machines. So let's let's study this. And so it's mixed, like it's good, but it's also like you got to have some cautionary uh discretion when looking at some of these studies as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's and right now, I mean, most of the studies with hydrogen are funded by the government and not by the industry.
Ah,
And so anyway, so that's kind of a neat thing just to
that's a
consider.
good
But the
thing.
fact is
Yeah.
there is it's more difficult for labs to really study hydrogen gas because of the
Mm.
trying to be consistent in the method administration. I mean, doing a clinical study, that's one thing, but in order to understand the mechanisms and understand, because for example, we want to understand what is it exactly doing to the brain or to the
Mm-hmm.
heart. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, unfortunately, that requires to sacrifice these animals and then to
Autopsy.
actually look at a histochemistry level, looking at the heart, looking at the brain, looking at the kidneys, looking at the different organs to make sure that number one, there's no toxic effects, and number two, what are the protective effects, right? And those preliminary studies are simply required in order to really understand how this might affect at the clinical level. But
Mm.
how do you administer the hydrogen in a very consistent and controlled way in a laboratory setting? And that's difficult. So there are a lot of scientists and researchers all over the world that are very interested in doing research, but haven't done it yet because it can be quite challenging to actually do that in the laboratory level because that may mean you have to buy a tank of hydrogen gas and then you have to get a flow regulator, then you get a certain approvals, and you have to have write up all these things, or you have to change, really make a lot of things by hand, and it can just be challenging. So hopefully, in the near future, with more research is done, there'll be more methods that can be used by other researchers that they can take these clear, well-defined methods to administer the hydrogen, and then we can have even more studies.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's definitely needed. And then when you look at the studies again that are out there, like say for instance, there's a lot of these kind of like hydrogen bottles that are popping up everywhere, and I feel like they will take studies that I'm like, that's not even a comparable piece of
Yeah.
equipment. You're touting these benefits of hydrogen on your hydrogen bottle, and because it's like I said about red light therapy is exploding, right? Everyone knows about it. Hydrogen bottles are the new thing that I get ads every time I open up Facebook or
Yeah.
Instagram for a new different device or gadget. So maybe we can talk a little bit about um, different forms of delivery and what people would want to look out for and just be cautious of in that framework.
Yeah, for sure. So coming from Electric Hydrogen Institute, as we're a science-based nonprofit, we don't promote or recommend any specific products. We're just focused on the research, and I do get a lot of message about what products should we use,
Yep.
which ones do I recommend, which ones this. I don't make those recommendations because it becomes so subjective in terms of like, well, what are your needs and what do you want to do, and there's just so many variables to consider, and Then if I mentioned, this company, then maybe another company would be upset. How can it say my company? Like it could just be difficult, right?
Yeah.
But there are some guidelines, that people should consider, because to your point, people will come out with these bottles and they'll be, citing all this literature, but those studies were not done on their bottles.
Right.
That's not always a problem, but if the bottle doesn't even make therapeutic levels of hydrogen, that is a problem. Like there's something
Yeah.
fundamentally disingenuous about promoting a product, claiming it provides these benefits when actually the dose it provides is not the same level, and
Right.
sometimes not even detectable. That
Mm.
is, I don't know, you could go as far as saying that is criminal, because certainly we would say that if somebody is citing a bunch of studies on the benefits of vitamin D and they're selling these capsules that contain no detectable traces of vitamin D, that
Right.
that right? Or every once in a while it has vitamin D, but not all the time. And some of the
Right.
products can be like that, right? And so you do have to be cautious. And so one of the ways, one of the things to do is look to see if the product has been certified to IHSA criteria.
Mm.
IHSA is the International Hydrogen Standards Association, and so this is an international group of researchers that have determined the accurate way of testing hydrogen gas in water, which is not with ORP or these ORP type meters or whatever. You
Hmm.
can't simply do that. You need to use gas chromatography. And then also, what is the minimum dose or concentration of hydrogen that is required to be even considered hydrogen water? So that would be one thing. And then others, if there's an independent lab report or something that can confirm what the concentration or dose of hydrogen is that you would be receiving, so that you
Mm.
can determine if it is, applicable to some of the clinical studies. Like we've done studies using the hydrogen producing tablets, which can produce a very high concentration of hydrogen for a short amount of time if you ingest it
Hmm.
soon, which we recommend in the studies. But then to your point, then you'll get, these bottles or other products that will be using that research to promote their product when their product only produces, 10 to 20 times less of the hydrogen that's
So
were
what a
provided in
tablet
these
would.
studies,
Yeah.
right? So it is problematic with that, right? And so
Hmm.
number one, yeah, you want to make sure it has that criteria. Now, well, it doesn't, just because it's not certified doesn't mean it's not therapeutic or it's not going to be good for you, right? It's just that's something that, is an indicator that you can look at, right?
Right.
And then with the bottles in general, yeah, you do need to be careful, because sometimes they don't even have a membrane, and then you can have like ozone or chlorine and, oxygen and in the waters, which it's not necessarily terrible, but you can, not have therapeutic levels of hydrogen, or maybe
Right.
you're getting contamination from the electrodes or from the membrane itself, right? So there's a lot of things to consider with these bottles in general, and then just with their longevity and their consistency. So I mean, there are bottles out there that can work. I have some that I've used, but you can't just run to Amazon and buy the cheapest bottle out there and expect that's going to work just as well as the hydrogen that we use in the clinical studies, right? So
Right.
when it comes to hydrogen water, yeah, there are a lot of ways to get it, from the bottles like we talked about, the hydrogen producing tablets, that we mentioned, and maybe a clarification, with those tablets, because they are used magnesium,
Hmm.
and so some people think, oh, you can just get magnesium oxide, or I'm taking magnesium supplements, and so the benefit of the magnesium is actually the hydrogen. Or some people say, well, the benefit of the hydrogen is actually from the magnesium. But to clarify this, this is not the same magnesium that you initially get from a supplement. In supplements, it's a magnesium salt, like magnesium chloride or magnesium oxide or magnesium citrate, magnesium threonate, glycinate, and so on, right?
Hmm.
Those forms of magnesium are inside its ionic form,
Mm.
and have no electrons to make hydrogen gas, so it just dissolves in the water, but it can't produce hydrogen gas. Whereas the other form of magnesium is non-ionic elemental metallic magnesium. This is the kind of magnesium used in like fireworks, and it's military grade magnesium. It's explosive. But when this magnesium reacts with water, okay, it releases two electrons into the water, and water is H2O already. But when
Hmm.
it releases those electrons in, it decomposes the water molecule to form the magnesium hydroxide and hydrogen gas. So you can see all these bubbles coming up, and that's hydrogen gas that's being produced. The byproduct ends up being magnesium ions, which is the 100% bioavailable form of magnesium that our body needs. And so, anyway, that's how the tablets work, is they react with the water to produce hydrogen gas. So they don't contain hydrogen gas, and it's not the same type of magnesium that is used, in supplements or things. And also, and people do the DIY methods of hydrogen water, where they just buy like Flint and magnesium off Amazon, and you can mix it with citric acid, and you can do that.
Mm.
Yeah, people have done that. But then you have to worry about the metal contaminants. If there's lead and arsenic and all this stuff in there, and how much magnesium are you really getting? And there's a lot of concerns, and people have had some health issues because
Hmm.
they're doing this method, not realizing that the problems that could be associated with that, right? So like with the tablets, before we do any clinical studies and things, they're tested at very high standards to ensure that they have low levels of lead and arsenic and other problems. There's an internal standard actually that it has to be below, which is like 5 times lower than or 10 times lower than what the FDA and EPA use, just to make sure that those things aren't there. But you don't, if it's just buying things off Amazon, you don't necessarily know that, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and then the same thing with the bottles, this is kind of a similar conversation with that too. Again, importance of having products that are certified to the criteria of IHSA. Then that's for the hydrogen water products. And then, of course, there's the ready to drink products that are out there on the market. Now, hydrogen is the smallest molecule, like we said, so you can't have it in plastic bottles. And I've seen
Right.
bottles that are in plastic, and they claim hydrogen water, and well, there's no hydrogen in there, right? It's
No.
impossible. You
No.
have to have an aluminum container,
Hmm.
and it's like pouches can work for a little bit, but over time, the hydrogen gas does go out because it has like pinholes, it has the plastic caps. Often it'll go out.
Yeah.
So cans are typically the best ones. But then even that, you have to make sure there's an independent lab or something that have verified the concentration, because I've seen companies claiming 2 to 5 milligram per liter or ppm, and then when you actually test it, it's below 2 milligram per liter, right?
Mm.
Or even much lower than that. And so you have to do the testing and things on that as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like it's it's based on research, but it may not be research with that particular product. And so
Yeah.
just kind of like buyer beware with all of that stuff. And with the going back to the tablets, so you're basically saying that most of the tablets, the heavy metals and the leaching like that is not necessarily a big issue, because for a while I was loving the tablets and taking those. And then I was told, no, those are just terrible. Stay away from them. And now I'm kind of back to like, I think the tablets are okay. It's just more my issue with the tablets is like, if you want to get therapeutic benefits, it's going to be expensive, because you're going to need to
Right.
just
Right.
keep on buying them constantly, rather than maybe investing in a machine that allows you to make hydrogen water. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
heavy
Yeah.
metals
No,
in the
the tablets.
tablets.
Yeah, the tablets have gone through. I think most brands have been certified to IHSA criteria, but yeah, there's like, I know there was one controversy because there was um, the internal standards were leaked, and the lead content was pretty close to those standards, and people misinterpreted that to think that, look, like if you took 2 tablets, you'd be above the upper limit, right, of lead. But that was an internal standard set by the manufacturer, which is like I said, like 5 to 10 times lower than what the EPA and FDA set for supplements. I mean, there's it's when you do the comparisons, you're more likely to get a lot more lead from eating your chips, or well, you could have that anyway. But I'm just saying
Yeah.
it's quite low. It's a high purity, and then when you do get it, it makes the magnesium ions, which most people are deficient in. Like we only
Hmm.
get around 400 milligrams or 300 milligrams of magnesium a day, whereas we need at a minimum closer to 400
800.
to
Yeah.
500 milligrams a day,
Yeah.
and optimally closer to 700 milligrams per
Yeah.
day. So the downsides of the tablets is you mentioned the price, which I don't have a problem with because we've done clinical studies, so I have a bunch of tablets and reserves, so I don't have to buy
Go
them.
buy
Um,
$50 a
yeah,
bottle. Yeah.
right. But that would be one because it's continued expense, especially if you have a family, you're trying to give
Hmm.
tablets and all this stuff. It
Hmm.
can be expensive.
Yeah.
And then there's the taste, and some people don't like the
Yeah.
taste at all because it's not just pure water. And I don't mind the taste, but sometimes I would prefer just pure water.
Yeah.
I will tell you my hack that I've been doing. I don't know if it's called a hack, but everyone uses that word these days. I like to supplement with glycine also, and glycine a
Mhm.
little bit sweet, and so I'll actually take glycine and mix it in the water, and then I'll drop a tablet in that water, and it just because the tablet already has like a lemon or like just a flavor of
It
that
has a
malic
distinct
acid, like a
flavor,
tart taste.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and then mixed with the glycine, it kind of makes a little sweet and things.
Hmm.
Um, so I'll do that sometimes. And then of course when you do the tablets, it does produce a very high level of hydrogen gas, but you do need to drink it with it
Quickly.
as soon as that tablet dissolves. You want to be
Mhm.
drinking it while the water's still cloudy. If
Yeah.
you wait for 5-10 minutes, then the
It's
concentration is
gone.
down. 80% of the gas is lost.
Yeah.
Whereas with like the bottles that if they do work or other methods, right? The half life is a lot longer.
Mm.
You're never up to like the 7+ milligram per liter level either, right? You're still down to the 1 to 2 milligrams per liter. But that those from the tablets, the gas is not fully dissolved. So if you want to get the most benefit, you've got to drink them. You got to take it fresh, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so I think the tablets are fine, but there are that drawback, and so so you could probably have several methods where you can get the tablets, you're getting the magnesium, ensuring you're getting enough magnesium on a daily basis, getting a high dose of hydrogen, then maybe you have some other method where you're able to just drink hydrogen water, just pure hydrogen water, whenever, wherever you want,
Yeah.
and because I kind of cycle because I have that I like use like the tablets like that, and then I have like different hydrogen water type products where if I just want clean, pure hydrogen water, right? And
Hmm.
then like the ready to there's a ready to drink product that I've been using, the Hydro Shot product. I don't know if you've heard about it before,
Is it by
from
Water
from
and
H2Bev,
Wellness? Yeah.
um, yeah, they also promote it, but the company is actually H2Bev from
Okay.
Texas. Yeah,
Okay.
it's in fact I think I have one. Um, yeah, like yeah, like right here. Yeah, just this hydro shot. That's like an
Okay.
old can actually.
Okay.
Um, anyway, but there it's not just hydrogen though, so it's a little bit different than everything else because it's a functionally infused beverage because it has nitric oxide, produces nitric oxide, and hydrogen acts synergistically with nitric oxide,
Ah.
and so it's able to potentiate the benefits of nitric oxide without and negating the harmful effects of nitric oxide. So you get sustained nitric oxide release over time, and so anyway, so there's lots of different products. So I kind of cycle through different things like that have
Hmm.
some benefits. So we actually published some studies on that one, on that method also. And then of course there's another way we didn't talk about to get hydrogen water, which could possibly be the most common way that people get hydrogen water is
Hmm.
alkaline ionized water. Maybe we should talk about
Yeah.
that for a second.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah, because I'm
Yeah.
sure you get lots of questions or wondering about, the
The
alkaline ionized water,
Kangen
right?
machine, right? Or Kangen. I never know if I'm saying it correctly. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and there's lots of other brands out there. Um,
Okay.
and and so yeah, it was like and I mentioned for my story back in 2009 when I came across alkaline ionized water. Um, well, I didn't know no one was talking about hydrogen gas, but I was trying to understand, how it actually worked. And everyone I talked to said, "Oh, it's because it has free electrons in there and has a negative RP and has microclustering and has an alkaline pH and has a lower surface tension. It has all these claims." And so I started to systematically investigate the claims. And when I got back to the university, I started visiting with my chemistry and biology professors about these claims. And everything that I brought up, they were like, yeah, that's impossible. You
Mm.
can't have microclustering. You can't have free electrons in the water. I mean, and now I know this, and I talk about it on my social media
Hmm.
through the institute, where because I try to explain things not just by saying this is how it is, but I want to explain so people can realize for themselves like why that is, right?
Hmm.
And Anyway, it was through very a long study though. What I found that when you do electrolysis of water, like with these units, you do decompose the water to hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, and
Mm.
hydrogen gas then is in the water. And it turns out that the hydrogen gas is responsible for making the negative ORP in the water. And so we did have a whole bunch of posts on our social media on H2MHI, where we talk about the ORP. So I encourage anybody who's heard about ORP, who's a little confused about that and voltage and all this stuff, to check that
Mm-hmm.
out, because we clarify a lot of misconceptions about that. But in this case, with the alkaline ionized water, the ORP was due to hydrogen gas. Now you can
Mm.
make a negative ORP from other methods, and in fact, we talk about there was a lawsuit where people died drinking water with a negative ORP because it was
Whoa,
made with
really?
other. Yeah, exactly. It's a big deal. So
Wow.
it's not something that we can just be like, yeah, ORP is good for you, negative is good, positive is bad. Like
Right.
you can't do that. People have died with that, with those types of beliefs. So sometimes our
Wow.
beliefs that we promote and talk about are not harmless, they are harmful. And that led to the death and serious injury of people because of that belief, because they were drinking water with a negative ORP, but that negative ORP was due to certain toxic chemicals and not to hydrogen gas, which is
Okay.
therapeutic for you, right?
Yep.
But we and others found that when you, that hydrogen gas was the exclusive therapeutic agent responsible for the benefits in the water. And this has been demonstrated by myself and studies we published, as well as a whole bunch of other researchers. In fact, the number one company in Japan that sells alkaline ionized water. They have the greatest market share of alkaline ionized water, and right, have a greater market share than Panasonic, which is a big brand name. But
Mm-hmm.
this company, Nihon Trim, is the largest producer of alkaline water ionizers, and they have produced the most research. They have published a number of studies demonstrating that when hydrogen gas is removed from the water, like just by stirring it, and then the negative RP is lost and the hydrogen gas is gone, or other methods of removing the hydrogen gas, even though it went through electrolysis, even though it has all the, you would say the same claimed metaphysical properties or something, all those benefits are eliminated, clearly showing that it is the dissolved hydrogen gas responsible for the benefits. In fact, you can just take water and just bubble pure hydrogen gas into the water, and then you can compare that head to head with alkaline ionized water with the exact same hydrogen concentration, and the benefits are identical to each other.
Huh.
So we know categorically from numerous independent organizations and labs and institutes and universities and research groups that hydrogen is the exclusive therapeutic agent responsible for the benefits in this water. In so much that we actually published a study, you people can look it up. It's called Electrolyzed Water Review One. Hydrogen is the exclusive therapeutic agent, and yeah, if you just Google that, you'll find the article, and go through and systematically talk about every claim in the water that people have made about the water, and discuss the evidence, the
Mm-hmm.
lack of evidence, and the refuting evidence. And the only thing that has withstood scrutiny is the molecular hydrogen.
Mm.
And so, and it's interesting because people who are big advocates and longtime consumers of alkaline ionized water, they love finding this information
Mm-hmm.
because they get so excited when now they can answer all their questions and all the strange observations. For example, many people have found that they need to drink the water fresh. That for some
Mm-hmm.
reason it has to be fresh, and the more
Yep.
fresh it is, the better it works. Well, why is that? It's because hydrogen
The
is a
hydrogen
gas and it just goes out
evaporates.
the
Yeah.
water. You have to
Yeah.
drink it
Yeah.
fresh, right?
Yeah.
They
Every time.
also found that you have to clean the machine frequently, because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't clean the machine frequently, it's like the benefits seem to go away. And
Mm-hmm.
yet you still have an alkaline pH, you still get a negative ORP, but you don't get the benefits. And so people will put out like, make sure you clean your machines. Like all of a sudden, like, they clean the machines and they feel all this energy again. They feel like their arthritis goes away again. Or maybe they sell a machine, or somebody buys a new machine and they try that water and it's like, wow, your machine is better than mine. What's going on? And they get all these
It's
benefits.
dirty.
What's going on? Well, what happens is over time with these machines is you'll get calcium that
Yeah.
deposits onto the electrodes,
Yep.
and it's what happens is that when that calcium and minerals get deposited on electrodes, you still make an alkaline pH because you're still producing hydrogen gas, but
Mhm.
but the hydrogen gas is not dissolving in the water.
Mm.
It's just escaping. So you get a very small amount that dissolves in the water, which makes you have a negative ORP. You get a high alkaline pH, but you don't get the therapeutic benefits.
Mm.
But yet, when you clean the machine with like citric acid or different things,
Yeah, that's what
well,
we
now
use.
you move that deposits, and now the hydrogen gas dissolves in the water, and you get these benefits again, right? So all these observations can also be explained by the mechanism of hydrogen gas.
Hydrogen.
And so
Yeah.
now when people really understand this and they know how to measure it and everything, they can now take these machines and they can, because if they've already put a hefty investment in this, right? It's good for them to know, okay, I already bought this machine, how do I optimize it? What do I need to do so that I can ensure to always get the benefits? Well, now we know that it's the hydrogen gas. You can do things to the source water, you can do things to the flow rate, you can do things to the voltage, you can clean the electrodes, you can do certain maintenance things on it. All those things will be helpful to allow those who've already made that investment to optimize the machine to get the most benefits from it that you can.
Mm. Yeah, that's one thing that I'm always telling people. If you get these machines, you don't necessarily want to use like tap water or just typical spring water. I recommend distilled water for that reason because they're gonna get calcifications a lot quicker if you're not if you're using a
Yes.
water.
However, this is why it becomes so difficult
Mm,
because so I agree. It's like tap water. First off, these machines are not filters; they're just
right,
electrolysis machines,
right,
and typically
right.
they come with just a standard carbon filter. Most of the people in these different companies, like there's a whole bunch of companies out there, right? But most distributors and people will say, oh, you want to, here's a whole filtration system you probably want to get as pre-filters before it goes
Hmm.
in the machine, which,
Yep,
which which makes sense because the main filter is just a carbon filter, but the
right,
electrolysis system is not a filter.
right.
Now,
No.
ideally, it would be great if you could just use, very pure water, distilled water or something, because then you wouldn't get the mineral deposits on the electrodes.
Right.
But because these types of electrodes are not a PEM or proton exchange membrane, like with the water bottles and these other hydrogen products that are out there, they're a different type of membrane. You cannot do electrolysis with very pure water. So people who
Mm,
live in areas with very low TDS water, well, you can hardly make an alkaline pH. And sometimes people have noticed that they'll get an alkaline pH and then within like a minute later, it's back to acidic. Well, that's because you don't have enough minerals for high enough alkalinity to maintain that pH. And if you
mm,
measure the concentration of hydrogen gas, it's essentially undetectable. It's
wow.
there's not very much there. So you actually have to live in an area with sufficient mineral composition. And that's
Mm,
why, like, there's one company that actually they sell a lot of products here in the United States and worldwide, but they come from Japan. And
hmm.
in that unit, there's actually a port where you can actually add minerals like this, the
Oh.
calcium, um, I forget the form of calcium, but you can add minerals, and that's important because,
Hmm.
like in Japan and these other areas where the water can be really soft, it's not enough to do sufficient electrolysis, and so you're not able to get a high enough therapeutic concentration of hydrogen gas, right? So anyway, if you live in an area where you have hard water, well, that's great. You'll get enough hydrogen gas, but that means you have to do frequent cleaning of the
Cleaning.
machine. But
Yeah.
if you live in an area with a very low concentration of minerals, well, okay, now you don't have to clean your machine, but you also aren't getting very high levels of hydrogen because you don't have enough minerals in the first place to get hydrogen.
So
So,
you want to
but
add
these are the types of
minerals to the
things.
water like after the fact, right? Before you,
Yeah,
that's what.
well, before it goes through electrolysis, you have to add
Ah.
minerals before it goes through electrolysis so that because pure water does not conduct electricity. You can't
Oh,
really do electrolysis in pure water,
okay.
with like distilled water or something like that, right? And like you can do distilled water with like the those hydrogen water bottles we talked about, but that's
Hmm.
because the membrane itself, it's a zero gap electrode because the membrane itself acts as an electrolyte. It's a proton exchange membrane, so the protons are acting as the electrolyte. So it's a totally different technology.
Right.
So
So we're talking
yeah, you
more
have to have
about the
minerals
Kangen
before.
machines as this being problematic for them, even though
Right,
they have the filter, because of the system that the Kangen uses, not necessarily the hydrogen bottles that have kind of a different
right.
mechanism for making the hydrogen. It's the Kangen that even get, the distilled or tap water
RO.
or RO could be problematic using one of those machines. Am I understanding correctly?
Right, right. If the mineral concentration is low, I'm not
Mm,
sure how low, maybe 50 milligrams per liter or something, or lower, it's just not enough. You need to add
mhm.
more minerals in order to get therapeutic levels of molecular hydrogen.
Okay.
And so this, but see, this is a critical for distributors to know about, to learn, because they bought this machine, this investment, and they want to
Expensive.
let other people know about how it's
Yep.
helped them or whatever. Well, they should also know all the limitations and the benefits, but and the ways, the things they need to do to optimize these machines if they want to do that, so that
Hmm.
they can ensure that they and the people they sell it to are getting the ideally the therapeutic doses of molecular hydrogen, so make sure they
Right.
have the right source water and everything, right? So
Got it.
yeah, I did an interview, a podcast, as well as an Instagram live with one of the top and additive distributors. It's on my Instagram if people want to check it out. If you're like a Kangen water distributor or something,
Hmm.
she had lots of really good questions, great insights, and we just went through all of this stuff, and it's been very helpful for her team and things to understand the hydrogen and how to optimize their machines a little bit more to get the benefits of the molecular hydrogen.
Hmm. But essentially, what you're saying with those machines, period, the benefit of them that they kind of tout is hydrogen, correct?
Well, some people are now touting hydrogen, but see, before no one was touting hydrogen. When I first started in educating this group of people about hydrogen,
Hmm.
people were so upset with me. They're like, I don't want to hear anything about this because for them, these top leaders, they were making money off of selling microclustering, alkaline pH, surface tension, zeta potential,
Which is
electrons, like all this
all
stuff.
BS, correct?
All BS. It is all BS, and we can demonstrate that it's BS. This is
Hmm.
not like my opinion versus their opinion or something like this
It's
is
science.
mainstream scientifically debunked. And now and Najik has also said, yeah, we shouldn't talk about microclustering because there's no evidence for that, right? Like they have transitioned, and so now hydrogen is becoming something
Yeah,
that
they
a lot of
talk
people
about
talk
the
about.
hydrogen
Not
all the time. And I'm like, but is this even the
Yeah.
best piece of equipment for the money for making hydrogen? And is it even reliable? Kind of based on the things that you're telling me, it doesn't seem like either of those would be correct.
Well,
Yeah.
and that goes into the level of I guess subjectivity, right? For some people,
Yeah.
they really
Yeah.
love they love their machine. They've already made that investment. They want to
Hmm.
optimize it the best they can.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, if you can really clean your machine and do things just right, well, it is you can get hydrogen water on the tap,
Yeah.
that can be great. So, but those are the limitations and drawbacks, and the more that about your machine or your investment. It's all about informed consent, right? What I
Right.
don't like was when
Yes.
people tout,
Fear
oh, yeah,
mongering.
this is the best machine ever for hydrogen and it makes the highest concentration and it can do all this stuff. And that's just not
Not true.
accurate. That
Yeah.
that's not true. There are limitations. There are things, but there's limitations with everything. Same thing with the
Right.
bottles. People are like, this is
Yeah.
the highest concentration of the bottle and it's perfect. No, like we talked about how the bottle, the consistency is not, it's not great, and there could be issues, that
Hmm.
from a concentration wise to a safety wise and
Hmm.
other things too, right? So every product can have their limitations, but the more you can understand, the better informed consent you can have, so you can really navigate and determine what's going to be the best for you and your family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's what I try to do on this podcast period is just informed consent. And that, some people will take that as like fear mongering. And it's like, no, like you get to make your own decisions as an adult to see what is going to be the best choice for you and your family. And I'm just providing you with some information that you can research deeper, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
all it really is. And that's why I try to be as objective as I can, not even trying to give my opinions, but
Yeah.
what is a scientific consensus on this, right? What is substantiated and clearly shown in the literature, and when I what is actually just in the mainstream textbooks of chemistry that is, categorically irrefutable, right?
Mhm.
And because there's a lot of misinformation, like again, like the concepts of microclustering and electrons in the water. That is so clearly demonstrated to not be possible and be toxic if it were even true.
Yeah.
That people should understand that.
Yeah. How do you feel about the Brown's gas machines?
Yeah, I think they certainly can have therapeutic benefits because, in my mind, they're providing hydrogen gas.
Mm.
So Brown's gas is, they provide hydrogen gas and oxygen gas combination, and so I
Hmm.
call that oxyhydrogen. And we've done clinical studies using oxyhydrogen,
Hmm.
where it's a combination, which is because when you decompose the water molecule to 33% oxygen and 66.6% hydrogen, and then you inhale them both, that's oxyhydrogen gas, and there's benefits there. Now, the issue with the Brown's gas is that this is often shrouded in a whole metaphysical realm of people claiming, well, it's not actually hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, but it's this magical type gas that has these enigmatic properties that is this plasmic expanded, on all these scientific lingo words or whatever, that has all these benefits way above and beyond just molecular hydrogen.
Mm.
And yeah, that sounds wonderful, but there's simply no
No
concrete
evidence.
published evidence to demonstrate that. And
Hmm.
but there is evidence, in my opinion, that refutes those claims.
Mm.
So I'm open to exploring more evidence and things, but when people are just can become very dogmatic and like, no, this is orders of magnitude better than hydrogen because it's not hydrogen, it's this, and this, and yet there's not a single scientific publication. Now there are publications, but they're not evidence. They're just
Mm.
theoretical conjectures published in low quality journals, and they use a whole bunch of scientific, lingo. We call it psychobabble,
Right.
or technobabble.
Yep.
That's not evidence, right?
Right.
Let's show me the evidence, and that does not exist for those things.
Mm-mm.
So I guess I'm a little bit more concerned when it comes to this whole thing of Brown's gas, just because it has this connotation that is starts to entering into the realm of pseudoscience. That's a little bit
Yeah,
too much for me.
I agree. Yeah. So as a consumer, you just kind of have to do your research and your due diligence here. And if something sounds too good to be true, then go ask Tyler, right?
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying the Brown's gas won't have any benefits. It's
Right.
funny because I'll talk about how I don't believe these claims or something, or like with the like alkaline water ionizers. I don't.
Yep.
There's no evidence for microclustering and on and on. It was like, well then, what about all these benefits? And they just get so upset. I'm like, I
Angry.
didn't once say that there are no benefits to it. In
Right.
fact, I specifically said there are benefits, but it's
Right.
because of the hydrogen gas, not because of the
Right.
Brown's gas or because of the
Right.
microclustering or this or that, right? So
Right.
I think it's important to understand the mechanisms so that we can understand better what is going on, so we can then optimize a product or whatever our method is to get the most benefits. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody's watching and they're like, how do I know which hydrogen product to choose? What would be some things? I know you mentioned maybe some lab testing that you would want that company to employ. What are some things that a consumer might look for when they are searching for a hydrogen product if they want the water or the inhalation? What's important?
Yeah. So number one, making sure that the dose is similar to what we use in the clinical studies, especially if it has actually been used in clinical studies, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Making sure I personally like when the companies that are promoting the hydrogen are also being scientifically accurate and not
Mhm.
promoting a lot of things that are so far out there, like with like the Brown's gas concept or
Mhm.
something. But again, it's not to
Yeah.
say it's not a good product or something, right? I we also offer our MHI certifications, educations about molecular hydrogens, so people can become MHI certified. And so we
Hmm.
also recommend that people buy products from people who are MHI certified. And maybe
Okay.
it's a bit self-serving, but we're trying to grow the education and things. But it also indicates that if somebody is selling a product and they're MHI certified, it enhances the probability that what they are selling is meets a lot of the important criteria as well. it's so that it is good, right? So if you go onto the website molecularhygieneInstitute.org, and then you click on articles, or your research or articles, and then there's a place where it says, how to get hydrogen or something like that. If you click on that, there's a couple articles that we have that talks about some of the criteria or some of the considerations that you should look at when investigating hydrogen products. But like I said, we don't make specific recommendations. I actually shared a bit about what products I have used and things and within this podcast, which normally I don't do so much of, but I just thought
Mm-hmm.
I'd share some of that because we have published some
Yeah.
studies on that to give people
Yeah.
a flavor. But yeah, on our website, on our social media and things, we don't do any promotion or recommendations or something, just because we want to really stay more objective
The
in what
research.
we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I talked to Dr. Pollock, and he's like, I don't, people come to him all the time about structured water devices and all these kinds of things. And he's like, no, I just want to stay kind of in the research and the science, rather than promoting different devices and things. And I appreciate that. I really do, because we need, why I wanted to bring you here is I wanted kind of an unbiased, nobody's paying you to have this conversation with me type of a deal about
Hmm.
something that
Hmm.
could be very helpful for people, therapeutically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's really my mission is to, as part of the mission of MHI, is to advance the research, the awareness, and the education of hydrogen as a medical gas. And so, if I can just promote that a little bit, so people, because people who are interested, like I said, we do have our MHI certification courses where people can come in, and this is not just about hydrogen, but people who have just a general interest in science and chemistry, but they're like, they're scared because like chemistry can be hard, and like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to take a college level chemistry course. We literally go through, we say like, electrons are negative, protons are positive, and this makes up an atom, this makes up matter, and we start at that level so you
Mm-hmm.
can really understand hydrogen. But we talk about these concepts in such a way that you can apply it to all the areas of biohacking, from red light therapy to all the
Mm-hmm.
other hacks or whatever that's out there. So you can
Yeah.
enhance your own critical thinking and your ability to navigate, this entire realm of science. So I'm like using hydrogen in some ways as a conduit to just enhance the education and the awareness and the critical thinking ability of everybody. And so people have really enjoyed our courses, from the person who dropped out of high school and has been like wanted to learn stuff, but and just never really had that opportunity, and they
Mm-hmm.
really love the courses, to full on PhDs and medical doctors, where this is like such a review, but they really appreciate how we are able to structure everything together and give like refreshers and make it relevant to what's going on right now. And so I would, we'd love for people to check it out. I mean, it's not an intensive amount, and people can become certified within 6 to 12 hours.
Oh, wow.
You just with level one certification, it's super cheap. And they can just, there's 6 courses. It's 1 to 2 hours each course. It's all self-paced and everything. But people have really loved it. And so I'm trying to, we use this so we can fund our nonprofit in a
Mm.
way to continue publishing research. I mean, it costs, several $1,000s just to publish a research article in some of these journals, for example. So this is, there's no like major philanthropic donor that's given us lots of money. So I've never taken any money from MHI. Just we don't make enough. But this is something we're trying to do to get that education out there. So I would love for people to sign up and check out the courses.
Awesome. I'll make sure to have that linked in the show notes. And you're always posting interesting things on your page and doing, like you said, the interview with the woman about the Kangen machines and things like that. If
Yeah.
people wanted to follow you on your Instagram, how would they find you? What's your handle there?
Yeah, so just Tyler W. LeBaron. And yeah, I often post science type things, but I'm starting to post a little bit more things that I'm doing, like, because I'm way into like sports and some of the
You're an
competitions
arm
I've done.
wrestling champion, correct?
Yeah, I've recently gotten to in the field of professional arm wrestling. So I do have a recent video I posted where I've, won a bunch of competitions at some pretty high weight classes. So I was pretty happy about that. So I'm just trying to, just be more of a person. People can get to know me a little bit more
Yeah.
with that. But I highly recommend to follow, H2MHI. I have a team, my sister actually, who's helping me just do that to really grow MHI, the social media, following, because really, unfortunately, in this day and age, it's like people only want to listen to people who have, hundreds, thousands of followers, instead of
Mhm.
like the people
I
who like
know.
dedicated their whole life
Whole life. Yeah.
in the actual research, right? And so
Right.
we're trying to, we really would appreciate people following us, because we want to be able to get the attention of these gurus, or these big people, and who have a big voice, so that we can help spread the education information, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. People think that hydrogen water is the same as alkaline water. You
Right.
have Andrew Huberman, you have Joe Rogan, you have these people who have talked about hydrogen water, and everything they
It's
said was
wrong.
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 It was wrong.
I
And it's
know.
and Andrew Huberman even cited my articles. He cited my published articles, and then he misinterpreted some of the main things that I said, and I've since talked with him, but it's not
He
enough
needs to
for
have
him.
you on his podcast. He really
I
does.
would love that. I would love to, because I respect him as in the certain realms, of what he has done.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I would love to be able to talk about this,
Yeah.
and help.
Yeah.
Anyway, but because it's like such a
They
small,
have,
maybe this
yeah.
is my opinion, but then it's like, well, there's not enough interest, in that, and
Oh, there's a big
so.
amount of interest. Trust
But there
me.
is, though, if we could get all the
Yeah.
hydrogen enthusiasts to like, no, we need this, we want this,
Yeah. Yeah.
then it would happen, right?
Yeah.
But it's so we appreciate everyone's help to spread the awareness, spread the message, and help us reach more people.
Yeah, I've heard far too many like bigger influencers or people just that they have these big voices and big names saying there's no benefit to hydrogen.
Yeah,
Your gut makes 5 liters of hydrogen gas a day, yada, yada, yada. You don't need it. Sunlight striking your skin, that melanin produces molecular
produces
hydrogen in
enough
the
hydrogen.
body.
Not even true.
So that's
Yeah,
completely,
no, I know.
yeah, it's
There
bunk.
is no evidence for that, and it contradicts a number of laws of thermodynamics, and just the
Mhm.
way that enzymes and things work. There's a paper that was published, a hypothesis paper, but it's a hypothesis paper. It's not
Ar-
evidence. You
Dr.
know.
Arturo and his melanin book, is that the one you're referring to, or was there a
Yes,
different
and that was also a publication on in medical hypotheses that predates that,
one?
as
Okay.
well. And so that
Interesting.
that book, which I haven't read, I've just read some sections of it, and people have sent some to me, and I'm like, no, this is not accurate. Now,
Mm,
I like that he's bringing the awareness of things, and I don't mean anything disrespect to him. It's a lot of work to
right.
put into all of this,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm like, hey, let's I'd be happy to talk to these individuals. I talked with Gerald Pollack, and I fundamentally disagree with a lot of things that he said, but as a scientist, and he was humble enough to listen, and
Mm,
I have a 9-minute video where we went through water chemistry and things, and he was like, oh, wow, okay, well, maybe you are right on that. It was very interesting. Like some of these people, they also just want to know the truth, but they
yeah.
need to get out of the echo chamber and the
Right.
confirmation bias, and talk
Right.
to people who have really studied these areas and get different perspectives. And so we need to do that. We need to have more of these conversations, and challenge our cherished beliefs, so that we can really grow and get to the truth.
I agree. Well, I hope that this reaches the right people. And if anyone out there has a connection with Dr. Huberman, please let him know that we would love to see Dr. Tyler LeBaron on a future Huberman episode. I know I would love that, to get this message out, because hydrogen's definitely been very impactful in my life and my health for my daughter. And we are, the people that have tried everything else, and hydrogen was just kind of one of these things. I'm like, why not? you
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't see any negative side effect to this. And there has not been any. So it's just one of those things that I am excited about. And I hope that we can continue to further research and education around the topic, and not allow people, again, to twist it, so that people are unnecessarily spending money on things that may or may not benefit them. So, yeah.
yeah. I love how you ended that, and I completely agree. And that's what makes me passionate about hydrogen, is that it is something safe. We still need more research to really know what's the true clinical effects and everything else. But it's safe. So if you have the means and the wherewithal, and you want to try it, and you have informed consent, and you've seen this clinical studies, and something that's interesting to you, then try it. There's no downsides except that maybe it won't work as well as you hoped it would, or you might have an experience like you've had in your family, and it could just be a life changing. Whether it was placebo effect or not, at least something happened, right?
Yeah.
And that's exciting. I'm glad that
Yeah.
you had that happen in your life, and
Yeah.
that is exciting.
I think with kids, and especially kids like my daughter's, non-speaking autism, the placebo effect doesn't really happen as much. It's either going to work or it's not for her, because it's just like, she I don't know how the intricacies of her mind, but typically if something, is going to work with her, there's not a placebo at play. She's just going to reject it if it doesn't energetically feel right for her. She stopped liking more than a couple minutes of red light therapy, and I said, well, I guess that's all she really needs right now. She knows best. So, yeah, it's always interesting to look at things that way as well.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to make sure I have all of your links down in the show notes so people can follow you. Follow those pages on Instagram, especially. Let's grow this, get this message out there. And thank you, Dr. LeBaron, for being here with me today.
Well, my pleasure, and thank you. Thanks for your audience for putting up with this stuff for so long. It's a long, boring. I don't know, not if it's boring, but scientific conversation. But I appreciate that, and so really, genuinely, thank you for your support and everything.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to the Evolving Wellness Podcast. Just a quick little reminder, this is not medical advice nor meant to be taken as a substitute for working one-on-one with a healthcare practitioner. And if you enjoy the show, please head on over to Apple or Spotify to leave the show up to a 5-star review. If you're over on YouTube, please leave us a like, leave us a comment. I really appreciate you for being here, for listening to the show, and your support means the world to me as I continue to try to pull guests from around the world to bring you informative content to empower you to make decisions about your own health. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.